Hello and welcome to this workshop session as part of the buildingSMART International Standards Summit for Lillestrøm 2023. Thank you for coming today. My name is Ra Twilly and I will be your moderator today. Today's session is titled Enabling Information Continuity Across BIM-GIS Domains, a Strategic Roadmap. We have a few speakers today. We have Mallela, Marc Goldman, Jantien Stotter, Michel Rives, and Schleusner. This session is scheduled to last 90 minutes, including time for questions at the end. The session is being recorded and will be made available in the replay section of the event as soon as possible. Before I hand over to our speakers, I would like to remind you that this is a hybrid event. For online attendees, your microphones will remain muted for the duration of the session. If you wish to make a comment or ask a question, please use the chat box in the control panel. For the attendees here in the room, please keep background noise to a minimum, and if you wish to make a comment or ask a question, please raise your hand and I will bring the microphone to you. I would also like to bring to your attention that buildingSMART is committed to ensuring that participation in the development of standards is unrestricted, and the process for their adoption is transparent, and standards that are developed do not favor any particular provider and are open, non-binding, and accessible to all. Please take note of our antitrust code of conduct. And now I'll hand over to our speakers.
Thank you, Ra. Everybody can hear me in the back? Okay. Well, welcome, brave souls. This half of the room is empty. The front is empty. You can all move up. Last session, last day, but I think it's an important topic, and it's something that at the last meeting in Rome, several expressed enthusiasm to see this. This particular activity is about the road mapping activity that we have started about in September, October of last year, to bring back the technical standards teams, user teams, and other members of the community, software and technology people, to the table within buildingSMART International, as well as the Open Geospatial Consortium, to reinvigorate, discuss, and essentially bring back the topic of BIM-GIS integration, which is becoming central to, what we do today. These domains, as you all know, have existed in parallel. The standards have existed in parallel. There is more focus these days to have integrated requirements rather than requirements for GIS, requirements for BIM, and the opportunity is now to actually take another look at this and see how we can align the interests to step forward quickly, solving real-world problems that we face today. So that is the whole purpose of this. It's a joint committee, and I'll explain the committee structure a little bit later and the activities. But mainly, I want to talk about some of the actions that we came up in the committee. But really, this is our first message to you. By no means this is a final plan. Audience, the participants in this room and the worldwide, within the buildingSMART and OGC communities will be given an opportunity to weigh in, give us your thoughts, so we can make a better plan, actually. So this is really an unveiling of the first part of this. I do want to acknowledge all the other speakers, I think some of whom will present, as Ra mentioned. And but I do want to acknowledge one of my co-workers at WSP, my colleagues, Abhishek Bhargava, who actually helped us through all these sessions, through all his data mapping and information mapping techniques. And we actually have a lot of information that we captured through our meetings in Airtable and other formats in terms of collecting information from the committee. So I do want to acknowledge him, but of course I want to acknowledge the in-room presenters. We have Marc Goldman, who will be doing a little bit of polling from Esri. We also have Michel. I think he'll join. There he is. He'll join us, and Greg Schleusner, who just left, but he's going to come back, and he's going to use that easel board, by the way. So you really need to move forward for the last bit. And online speaker, Jantien is online, and so is Michael. So we do have a team. It's a multi-part presentation. It's not just about the roadmap, but also some of the work that's happening, important work related to BIM-GIS connections. Now, I do want to emphasize two things in the title. One is continuity of data modeling. I think that's important because we're talking about different scales typically when we talk about BIM and GIS. The second one is we are not using the word integration. Now, I'll slip into the word integration because sometimes it's a bad word in the sense that integration may mean that you're creating a common data model. But really, today's world is about connection of data, maintaining multiple sources of truth, but finding ways to connect information that we need to connect across the scales. Okay, so I think we have had a lot of discussion about this in the committee, and I think these are things that came across, but it is still about BIM and GIS domains and bringing them together. The outline for today's presentation, I'll go through the background, a little bit of background. This joint initiative, which has restarted, this has existed before within this community and within OGC. So, but we are taking another look at it and doing something new. So we'll talk about that a little bit. The process, I won't bore you with the details very quickly, that some deliberation went into this. And then the activities and their timelines and what we propose as a committee, this joint committee, as next steps should be. And then we'll end with 2 presentations on some of the work that's already happening, some large use case stories that you'll hear, both on the building side and as well as the geotechnical side, that 20 minutes each. I think that's what I want to leave enough time. So after my presentation, we'll take a couple of questions. Marc will do his polling. That's very important to show enthusiasm in the room, for something like this, because we are restarting this initiative. Energy in the room would be important, but also, energy from outside. Once we socialize it, other participants are certainly welcome to partake in the next set of activities. So Marc will do some polling, and then we'll go into the user stories. So without further ado, let me jump into this one. About the background, why we need it. I don't think I need to tell anybody in this room. You've chosen to be here on the last day, in the last session, of why this is important. I don't think we can take building information modeling, the rich data that's attributed to construction of infrastructure and buildings, in isolation with the context in which you place them. There is enough evidence today that you really need those two to come together to provide meaningful insights. We talk about bigger problems in the world, whether it is equity issues or decarbonization issues. You have to think about the context in which you are constructing today, because everything touches those big social problems and economic problems we have. So it's clear that we build something, we represent it well in a physical twin, then we have a digital layer of information that we're all very familiar with, but we do need to connect them together, whether you call it digital twinning, whether you call it operational twin, whatever you want to call it, we do need to bring them together. So that's the context in which we set this. There are certainly big drivers. There is no doubt today there is increased demand for this continuity across scales. I think you'll see that everywhere. We are talking about this here. OGC has been talking about it for a while. There is increased cross-domain use cases. Think about smart cities, district scale developments, digital twins. This is not related to just buildings or property or energy facilities. It's about running jurisdictions, and there is definitely a cross domain. That can only happen when you bring different sources of information together. BIM and GIS are only 2, but there are geospatial information are only 2 sources of information. There are other sources of information that need to come together to make this work. But definitely these are two of the biggest sources. So cross-domain data use is also growing. Think about all the times you hear the word digital twin in a day, right? Or smart something. Then there is heightened emphasis by everyone to preserve the data value chain. I think we've heard enough about that in this, and we all realize what the driver is. But importantly, there is also better tools and technology and understanding of how these domains work together in the industry. We have the software industry is really done amazing things in the last 10 years or so in trying to bring these 2 worlds together. So we have to tap into that. There is technology like cloud, which most people, we have a cloud 4.0 now, with cloud of clouds, working and talking to each other. So we have open standards and open development evolution as well. Certainly IFC, we hear a lot about that. Greg will talk at the end about what you heard already in some of the technical sessions, but how it connects to this. He will mention that at the end. There is evolution of standards. I think everybody understands today that a real world object can be represented in multiple ways. There is really multiple views and multiple ways to represent real world. We can't have one view and a single view of everything. So I think standards are adapting to that. Development is adapting to that. There's better tools and technology. So we need to leverage all of this. That's why we have a renewed vigor in this exercise today. So let's make something work. I'll just go very briefly into the history. And again, this is just a snapshot. So this is not the first time we've come together, as I said. These concepts have really emerged, and I went back to recent history to look at it. The first concepts in early 2000, began emerging around BIM-GIS, and I don't know how many in this room in mid-2000 remember the data interoperability problem, and there was an effort called OWS4. How many of you know that? Okay. That was, again, a Geo plus BIM integration effort, 2006-07 timeframe. They did something similar. Certainly, they had issues then in terms of standards and interoperability of standards. And I think they were trying to solve that problem. Then I think some milestones, I'm flagging here, IFC and CTGML, standards came up to solve specifically this problem. And they started playing a big role in terms of data modeling and how to link those data together. Software industry then early 2000s, 10s or so, started developing tools, cloud technology, improved collaborations, mid-2010s or so. And then an important thing you'll hear, and you've heard already in this conference, is linked data. Again, that went back to mid-2010s in terms of RDFs, and the use of OWL, the semantic web technologies, essentially, to connect and link data in different sources of truth. And then late 2010s, we had a big effort in Europe, GeoBIM. How many of you have heard of GeoBIM? A few, that's great. So GeoBIM was a big effort, and it started, it gathered interest, but it unearthed problems in the sense that open standards themselves don't solve the problem, right? I mean, because you can be open standards compliant and produce data that cannot be meaningfully connected. Okay, so I think we need to then, because we're trying to solve general structures of data in standards development, we cannot dive down into use cases. So I think there was a recognition of that. So GeoBIM did have success, but it also challenged us to find new methods, and therefore you see evolution of the standards further in both the OGC and buildingSMART communities. So given all of this history, what's new, you might ask? I think all of this effort over the decade, couple of decades or so, has really begun to solidify one concept in our head is integrated requirements around geospatial data and BIM data. I think that is becoming very clear that you can't have requirements just for project delivery or facility management. You need to have integrated requirement that lasts the entire life cycle, from planning to use to end of life and back. You need to have integrated set of requirements. That's really come alive. Better data modeling and linking technologies. As I mentioned, how to model data without making your standard very heavy. Trying to model everything within the standard. How do you link the data? How do you modularize it? You hear some of these terms later. There is also a better understanding. People who use, modeling, data modelers, understand the IT infrastructure and the data science behind it. I think we're getting smarter as communities in terms of understanding the relationship between information science and modeling and metadata modeling. It's not just about an object and metadata properties, but how you classify them, how do you link them? I think that's the information technology domain typically, but I think those domains are coming together. I think there's heightened awareness. Now, it's not fully there. I'm not arguing that it's there, but it is improving with time. And as I said, better tools. So I think that's the imperative. So that leads us to the goal of this initiative, which is to really leverage that momentum and develop a user-driven roadmap. And this is very important for buildingSMART community. It's very important for the user community in OGC as well, that really we want this roadmap to be user-driven. In other words, we will show action. We have to show action to solve real problems quickly. So it has to start from bottoms up. That's the approach. Many efforts in the past have reached the same conclusion. So it's a user-driven roadmap of sustainable actions. We can't have a special committee looking at this. It's got to come, again, from a bottoms-up standpoint, because data is data, and we have to connect it, whether you're dealing with a building or with a road or a tunnel. Okay. But I think the key part of this is we still hinge on open standards. We believe open data standards are the way to get efficiencies in the data linking, to enable better information management, make better decisions across infrastructure life cycles, and indeed across domains. So that's the single goal, is to essentially leverage the momentum. And the nuance there is that we want to base it on user-driven and use cases. So some of the objectives for the roadmap are to identify the low-hanging fruit. What are some of the essential big use cases? What are some of the big problems that you can think of in your domain that benefit from the continuity of data modeling? We think that's an important objective. Then once you identify that, demonstrate the benefits of open standards to achieve the data connection goal. Hopefully that'll heighten the industry, get their attention, and heighten the awareness and interest in within the BSI and OGC ecosystems. OGC is not on the stage today, but they're equally committed to these objectives. Create a harmonized and consistent approach across the industry to model data that serves both purposes. I think that's very, very important. And develop a longer-term roadmap. I don't think we can solve everything, starting with use cases. We will hit challenges. The idea is that it's an iterative process of identifying challenges and solving them through the ecosystems of BSI and OGC to come up with a longer-term roadmap, but it's not a waterfall approach. In other words, we won't wait for everything to be perfect to show results today. We'll make do, but we'll populate the future plans, whether it's standards or tooling, using the challenges that we are facing today. So it's sort of an iterative roadmap, and you'll see that a little later. And then enable the end goal of this is we'll reissue. I think there was an issue for pilots, IDBE. How many of you are familiar with the IDBE pilots? Some of you are. So that had some success, but I think we believe if it's based in user-driven and use cases, we'll probably get more success. That's a hope. That we'll reissue a joint call when the roadmap is finalized for pilots and participation by owners and operators across the globe, to showcase, again, the power of the connection, the ease with which you can make decisions with these connections. So that was the charge of the committee. That's the committee there. It's a representation of consultants who work in the geo domain and the BIM domain and have a very good understanding of data and the IT side of things. We have data scientists on the team. We have consultants working in domains. We have software vendors. We have some owners represented on it. We have both traditional software and BIM native software, I call it. And then most importantly, on the right-hand side, we also have commitment from both the leadership on the standard side at OGC as well as BSI. And I had the pleasure of just coordinating this and facilitating and listening to the fascinating conversations that we've had. And we've had several work sessions, starting last year, one a month. We had about 12 sessions that basically built on the existing knowledge. We compared notes based on literature. We looked at some of the persisting challenges and some of the opportunities. And one thing we were united on is to center the roadmap on a desirable set of attainable use cases and in-motion work. I think I can't emphasize that enough, that it will be driven by real-world use cases and solving them quickly and showcasing the solutions, and then creating a set of roadmap actions and dependencies. And we created structures. We are going to propose at the end of today some of the next steps in terms of how to sustain this effort, because the roadmap is just on paper. In terms of roadmap development activities, the very first thing was, and I would like you to provide some input, and Marc will poll this at the end, is we asked the committee to provide us what they think are their biggest challenges and opportunities, and we kind of put them in 3 buckets. Certainly, the first bucket is adoption and implementation at client organizations. And my specialization is transportation, and I work very closely in the United States with a number of states that work in BIM. We have very large studies going on infrastructure side as well as bridge side, and Will Sharp is here, and he presented on the bridges, I believe, this week. But we also have a pool fund on applications of enterprise GIS in transportation. What fascinates me is when I sit in the BIM meetings and GIS meetings, the BIM managers and GIS managers don't always are not always in the same room when projects are discussed or operations are discussed. It's not like there is a divide, but they work in separate worlds. Most of them, the GIS folks will say, "Yeah, we have all of that data. We have it already in the system. We really don't need it from the BIM world." But I think when you peel back the onion, they start seeing the linkages. And so the point is there's a cultural adjustment to be made here. In terms of adoption, there's certainly a recognition of the need, but I think agencies world over are changing, and their mindsets are changing. But there are challenges there, and there are also opportunities because there is a desire to bring these worlds together. So that's a big opportunity. There's data management, modeling and integration challenges, publication and use, that's on the standard side. And then there's tools and technology development side. We do need tools to fulfill the requirements, using software solutions, but also we need tools to check if the data that's been brought together is valid for the purpose, right? So we have an ask of the software and tooling industry. So we do have challenges there, but the opportunity in that case is that there is more than adequate willingness to actually by the software and technology industry to play the game, actually help. As long as we can publish requirements, I think they'll be able to adapt and provide solutions, I believe. So again, I won't belabor you with all the specifics of each of these challenges and opportunities, but we did go through a list, and the list neatly folded into these three buckets there. The next thing we did in committee was looking at business domains, and we looked at several. We did storyboarding, what are some of the essential use cases that need to be solved. And we believe that the grounding of that, as I said, it's a bottoms-up effort. It starts with the expertise area that I have, and starts with my need for integrated requirements within that expertise area, and then understanding the user stories and use cases connected to the story. Okay, that's how we thought about this, and that's the bottoms-up approach I suggested. So we looked at aviation examples, building, highways, rail, waterway. There were other domains, digital twinning and smart development was also considered, at least in our committee. But I think when we are done with this exercise, we think this is also a place to actually take this roadmap and put in front of the infra room here in buildingSMART, for example, or our construction room, to actually find their own user stories. So we did some mapping related to the user stories. And what we came up with is we do need to have a rich set of use cases that come from a specific domain or a cross-domain example. And that may look something like this. There is a story, like for example, here I'll highlight the first row, develop an existing conditions model. I think Michel will talk about that for the tunneling example. As an architect or an engineer, I want to get existing site information on property lines, surrounding streets, utilities, zoning, and other property-related constraints so that I can create something. And then that's in the design epic stage. So within design, that will be a use case related to the user story of developing existing conditions model. Okay, so we do need to tabulate this. And again, those stories should come from committee, from within the rooms in buildingSMART and within working groups in OGC. And we may have any number of these, but there will be significant commonalities, I believe, when we're all said and done, and when we look at it in terms of the data modeling that's required and the data linking that's required. But this is the bottoms-up approach. So we started a list. This is an Airtable as we speak. But you can see the storyline. And these are real-world problems. These are problems of today. We did something similar on the highway side as well. And again, you should look at the storyline, the user story description, and the epic, the phase of the project, phase of the infrastructure lifecycle, where that epic, where that story or the use case falls. So you can see that the story is a bit broader than the use case. Use case can be very specific. So what we're shooting for here in this is integrated requirements. Another magic word we'll throw out here is to deliver minimum data products to get that use case accomplished. So again, we are not bloating a data model to have everything under the sun. We're trying to solve a specific problem using that solves a specific requirement on the owner side or the operator side, and that gives us a minimum data product. We're not shooting for the moon. Okay, again, that's another thing to recognize in this mapping. So anyway, so that's essentially the exercise that we went through, but of course, as we build on it, and I think there is a use case management initiative within buildingSMART. I think some of these can go right into and fit right into it, and we start managing the use cases that way. And I'm not sure what happens on the OGC side. I'm thinking that there is similar structure, Marc, and you can comment on that. So in terms of the roadmap activities then, essentially we divided the activities into 5 groups. The G1 we call it, which is the establishing owner agency needs and requirement for the integrated geo and BIM data requirements to solve a specific use case. We need to go through that first. That's the first set of activities. Second set is to tap into the OGC and BSI standard communities to create the Geo plus BIM working groups. I think that's the second activity, and I'll explain these in a little bit more granularity in the next few slides. Then develop standards deployment toolkits. So once you have the data modeling and connections, we believe that toolkits are the way. You can think of them as libraries, for software implementation of data, semantics, geometry, structure, formats. Essentially, the toolkit to support a use case. I think that'll be the output to solve the data connection problem. And then the fourth group of activities is coordinating with vendors to incorporate those toolkits in their applications. So they have a clear roadmap of what they need to do. I think this is very important. Otherwise, they are anticipating problems and creating solutions. And this will be honing into their creativity. And then developing specific training and onboarding of resources at agencies. I think that's a critical activity because today, we have BIM managers and we have GIS managers. I think tomorrow's world should, at every project, think about geo-BIM managers. And I call it, it's somebody who understands both worlds. I think that's really critical to drive this effort. So the roadmap is for 3 years. I won't get into every detail of this, but bottom line is, and the actions are not sequential. You see the G1, the first group of activities goes through year 1 to 2. Basically, most of it is completed at the end of second year. First thing, you can see that group 1 is more building awareness, getting the essential user stories and use cases to solve, and establishing the information requirements aligned to those use cases, and then developing templates for the call to pilot projects. The second set of activities is now looking at the governance framework. Once you have an integrated requirement and you have your data needs identified, and you have your data modeling done, how do you govern it? Who is in charge of that from a legal standpoint, contractual standpoint, and just from a data stewardship standpoint? So governance, and then the collaboration between the standards development organizations, vendors, software vendors, and consultants to develop both the data and the products, and then establishing programmatic partnerships. I think that model already exists within OGC and buildingSMART, so I don't think this is a big lift. Governance is certainly the key one because it's new. It's for the integrated requirements. And the third group of activities is to build out those modular and aligned open data modeling standards, establishing metadata modeling standards, and creating data models, templates, and development guidelines for single source of truth systems. As I said, there will be multiple sources of truth. It's not going to be a single source. And then establishing guidelines for consistent implementation of those standards across software systems so that we can realize the data connections use cases. And the fourth set of activities is related to coordinating with software and technology vendors to support those standards and developing requirements for BIM and GIS tools and technologies. And establishing the web services and APIs. That's the another piece that I want to emphasize here is we believe today's world is lightweight infrastructure. You don't have models. The integrations are done mostly through web services and APIs today. And I think this is no different, except it will be based on open standards published against a use case. And then the last set of activities is related to training and increasing awareness. So for each of these steps, I mean, you can see the time frame is very quick. It ends in year 3, but we start doing stuff right at the beginning. We start developing detailed case studies and showcasing, raising awareness in the industry starting in year 1. So whenever we start this initiative, we'll have immediately some use cases. In fact, today you'll see 2 that are already in motion and that tap into this roadmap and can expand on it. And so on and so forth. But the last point I want to make is this one, which is the concept is this is not waterfall, as I said. There's circularity. So group 1 and group 2 activities we call them planning activities that start right off the bat. Then the implementation and review activities are group 3, group 4, and group 5 activities where we're actually implementing standard data sets into software and actually improving that process. And then we do a retrospective on if things are working, and then we loop back into planning again. So we think this approach will essentially be a circular process throughout the 3 years. So the immediate call is for pilots. The immediate action is to showcase the biggest case studies we can find in every domain, so we get attention, and then renew a call for pilots, because we do need funding to sustain the effort, from clients, and clients should show interest, which I think will be based on the use cases we unearthed. So that's where I say this is an action-oriented roadmap. It's not like we need to solve completely all the data domain problems and data modeling problems and linking problems before we jump on it. So that's essentially the message there. In terms of next steps, how do we operationalize this? I went through the activities quickly, but the idea is to get the roadmap socialized here in this medium, but also send it in print through some forum, through buildingSMART. Hopefully in Q4 2023, we'll have all those roadmap activities outlined and sent out for general comment. So if you're interested, certainly you can look forward to that. And then develop a steering committee for governing the roadmap activities. And we believe that the steering committee membership can be driven through the existing structures within buildingSMART. So you can take all the infra rooms and the various initiatives and rooms within buildingSMART, taking the roadmap and making it an action item on their agenda to discuss the GeoBIM integration. Every single one. Probably, maybe the electrical, even there, we find definitely, so every single room and every single initiative here should, at least in an ideal world, have an agenda item in their discussions to think about the integrated requirements between Geo and BIM. And OGC has said that they have 5 working groups. Marc is leading one of them, Urban Digital Twins one. There are 4 others where they do the similar thing, essentially tag the chairs or the leaders of those committees to actually put this on their map, look at the roadmap of actions, come up with the user stories, and then start working towards developing the requirements and implementations. So, but outside that, there should be a governance body of some sort drawn from both the industry standards development organizations and their communities to guide the roadmap development process, see how things are going, and take a check on it. There may be initiatives that are not in the rooms that may be cross-domain, so we may need to have a special project or a committee, but those are all discussions to be had. Once we have a steering committee, once the roadmap is published and commented upon and finalized, we can then reissue the call for pilots. That's when the clients get engaged. We believe that will be in year 2 after the initial stuff. We can start preparing the call for pilots at the end of year 1 and market it, really in a way that is appealing to the industry. And then after that, we essentially provide visibility through documentation. We will do some initial documentation in year 1, but as we go forward and the pilots are advertised and done, we can provide more documentation and more visibility into the effort between the communities using the community platforms. I think OGC is not here, but they've given assurances that they endorse this approach, and they've even outlined some of the structures for it. So that's essentially our roadmap and our actions that we have described. Let me pause and take a couple of questions from the audience. And Marc, you can work your way up here to do some polling. So of you. So you'll have to use your smartphones. Yes, sir, at the back.
Eivind Pagander Tysnes, Bane Nor. How does this align with the work done in ISO? How does it align with the work done as there's being done in ISO?
That is true, yeah. So Eric Poirer is on our committee, and I believe he sits on the technical committee. So some of the recommendations from this roadmap activities, he promised that he'll liaise with the ISO technical committee to take it forward.
And there's also a working group that Maya, who sits in the airport room, she's been a representative of the ISO Joint Committee on GIS and BIM. It is part of the infrastructure domain, that room, and I'm now the appointed person on that. So there's a number of cross-pollinations happening, including the ISO technical committee.
Thank you. Yes, Peter.
Thank you for
and you are on the committee too, so you can answer your question yourself.
I don't think I am anymore, but I saw on your slide here several times that you you wrote it as developing new standards, or do you think this is the right approach, or should we try to link the existing standards that we have today with other methods instead of creating new standards?
Yeah.
I mean, we have a large number already.
Yeah, I think the idea is to resist the development of new standards unless otherwise required. So maybe when I spoke about developing new standards, I really didn't, standards to model data using existing open standards is what I meant. I didn't mean developing new standards to integrate the data. So standard practices is what I meant, not data standards and exchange standards. So yes, the idea is to not duplicate. I think the idea is to retain what we have and link as efficiently as we can.
I think that could be written more clearly, so
Clearly.
there are no misunderstandings about that.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Agreed. Thank you for that input, Peter. Jugal.
Thank you. Good to see the progress. I think this is certainly essential and required. I have a couple of points, and I see you have a 4-year roadmap. Now, 4-year is a short time, but is considering the current focus on platform, which ESRI and Autodesk, everyone is going. So have you considered the potential impact of that in terms of if that platform happens, if these organizations move on to that platform, what would be the likely impact on this effort? And is that something that you would want to bring forward?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question. I think the brevity of this presentation probably trumped that point. It's a very good point you make. Number one, it's only a 3-year roadmap.
Yeah.
And the roadmap is supposed to be iterative, Jugal. So this is not set in stone. You see the circularity in the planning phase. So if there is development on, let's say, the implementation, like G4, coordination with software vendors and incorporating toolkits, or working through the standards deployment process, G3 and G4, if we find new lessons in each year as the steering committee looks at this stuff, they have an opportunity to advance some of the concepts forward. So yes, so it is going to be an iterative, keeping up with the industry type of effort rather than waiting for the perfect solution. So.
Perfect. That's good to know. And in your G5, you said develop training and onboarding resources. I think that is also something that potentially can be brought forward with the current professional certification that buildingSMART is doing,
right,
because they have these 6 modules. One of them focuses on open standards, and I think it will be good in the upcoming revision if there's a component of open BIM and GIS integrated in there, so that there's a certain level of awareness, which is part of your, let's say, G1 component, is brought forward as well.
That's a great point. Something that we debated on in the committee, but I think tapping into those, at least advertising the intent to have. So when I talk about training here, it is really training on the toolkits and implementation and requirements gathering. It's very, very focused on the geo and BIM integration side of things. Awareness component is G1. So we'll socialize the messaging, but I think training is required. But I think we should put the plug in.
Yeah.
Point out.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Ruben. One more? What time do we have? A few minutes, because they've got longish.
Just wanted to ask some question about timelines. You said it's a 3-year roadmap, and that it's been going on for about a year. Like, are we year 0 or are we middle of year 1? Or how does that work?
The year 1 will happen when we have the steering committee formulated. That has to have, mandatorily, that should have membership from both OGC and BSI, from all the relevant stakeholders within these communities. So that's still year 0 up until that point, and then we start the effort.
And do you expect that to happen soon, or like?
So it depends on how quickly I don't know how quickly BSI and OGC want to move, but there is interest to move it quickly. We think we can publish this roadmap by the end of this year. I think concurrently we can start thinking about structures in the new budget years in terms of how to take it into the various working groups, within the communities. So, yeah.
But the BSI OGC connection has been established, and like they're actively involved.
Right. So you see the membership here. So 2 weeks from now, we have a similar presentation in Singapore where OGC is going to pitch the same roadmap, we hope. So they're going to socialize this to their communities and seek participation. So the effort is definitely bilateral, and it's a common cause that they're both working towards. And there is commitment from what I can tell. So.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so I think in the interest of time, I'll have Marc do his summary comments if he has any, and then a little bit of polling. Marc? So.
Yes, I mean, just in summary, thank you, Jag and Avishek, for really providing leadership, carrying the torch on this effort. Maybe just to emphasize that last point about commitment from OGC, every meeting has had either Scott Simmons, who's the chief. Oh, you need to share that. Okay, yeah. Scott Simmons is the chief technical information, one of the executives of OGC, as well as other various members from OGC are on meetings every week when they happen, or every 2 weeks when that's the cadence. So it is very much a shared effort right now, but with, perhaps let's call it maybe a handshake promise of commitment, not the formality that is needed on both sides. But I have not really seen any wavering that this is not important. And on the infrastructure room, one of the several streams of the roadmap is GIS and BIM integrations and overlap. And by being on that domain and this working group, there's been an opportunity to create some synergy. But as Jag said, that same concept of the importance of GIS for the product room, for the rail domain, for all the domains where GIS, location, spatial analysis, whatever you want to call it, has any play, it should be considered somewhere in the roadmap so it isn't secondary and just a secondary thought. So we want to collect from this room, which I can just see from faces and where I know you work, a pretty broad range from owner-operators, engineering design firms, construction companies, just a little bit of feedback on some of the information that was already presented, and then an opportunity at the end to sort of throw your name into the ring to participate in one way or another. So please take out your phones if you haven't. Snap the QR code here. It'll take you to a mentee survey application. And as I scroll through the different images here with a couple of questions, it'll pop up on your phone. You will have to scroll down to the bottom on some of these pages to actually get to the question to be answered. And there's really, I think, only 2 questions total. So that's the QR code. If you are having trouble with the QR code, you can also just go to mentee.com. It'll ask for a numeric code, 2205-8600. And that number also is going to be at the top of the few questions. So I can already see 6 of you, 9 of you, 10 of you. All right, in real time. I know there's more than 11 people in the room.
We need a GIS map.
Yeah, exactly. Well, next time. And I know we have people online as well. So that number on the lower right there with the thumbs up should really be popping really high. So thank you for already showing your interest just by playing with the Mentee application here. So on to the first question. This is very open-ended by design. We didn't want to just give you 5 or 6 or 7 topics, but we want to hear from the range of folks in the room here, online as well. What are the challenges that could be addressed if and when BIM and GIS are connected, as we talked about, as you perhaps have tried to do, but maybe hit roadblocks, or perhaps your company, your firm, your students, if you're from academia, have already conquered some of the challenges, but you know that it could be done more easily. There we go. We're already getting some rolled in. So data management, first answer came in, and these will pop up, and feel free to type out the same one if you see it. I think you can also vote on them somehow. I haven't specifically learned how to do that, but we want to just hear from you some feedback, some language, some text, some workflows that you've tried to accomplish. In my day-to-day life at Esri, a little bit of background, I serve as a spokesperson for Esri into the AEC and infrastructure community, and act as a spokesperson from the industry back into the company. So I see some amazing integrations between BIM data and GIS environments. And I've even upset a few people at Esri when I've told them that the lines between where BIM starts and stops and GIS starts and stops has become very fuzzy. Some capabilities that customers are putting into place is dramatically better than it's been just a few years ago. that kind of upsets a few people because we want to be thought of as a GIS company, and calling ourselves a BIM company could be confusing. So thank you for some ideas, some thoughts, some feedback. Keep them coming. Really appreciate everyone taking some time here to fill in their thoughts on how we could bring some challenges to be more easy around BIM and GIS. So broader GeoBIM support for design authoring, certainly. Just general interoperability voted a few times. Work order to GIS to object information to detailed model. Complete workflow. Asset management, certainly. 3D planning. So I think that might be a 3D planning, 4D planning again.
Open planning.
Open planning, yes. So this is great feedback, great open ideas for us to chew on, to look at and compare to the use cases, the user stories that have already been prepared. And also just maybe a note about that. A resource like that, a resource of structured user stories from a software development company point of view is a treasure trove. Yeah. It's a gold mine of information. Our product managers spend hours and days and weeks and months putting together and prioritizing user stories, getting that kind of structure in the product manager's hands that's already been prioritized, that's already been well thought out by industry experts that they can then just vet and compare and prioritize versus starting from scratch. This is just a gold mine of information for our team. So we really appreciate that. Transfer of BIM from construction to as-built on GIS. Great feedback, folks. Thank you. And then the last one, one of the last few slides that Jag had on screen was these 5 priority areas, from establishing the owner agency user stories, tapping into the existing standards and structures to create some GeoBIM working groups within our various organizations, developing data standards, the deployment toolkits, so that these pieces can be put in place, coordinating with software vendors so that we can incorporate these toolkits and adapt our roadmaps, and then developing those training onboarding materials for agencies. You should be able to just kind of drag and drop and move around, and then at the very end, submit your answers for these 5. And I expect, given the varied makeup of this audience, from owner-operators to construction companies to engineering firms, we're going to see a pretty varied set of responses. So 1 person, 2 people, 3 people. Don't forget to hit submit at the bottom. So just take a moment here and consider what you think is most important, and it might actually be an indicator of what you personally would want to get involved with as it pertains to this effort. So I know this isn't as easy as just typing out a few words and hitting submit, but I'll just let this sit for a minute and see if what continues to float to the top or what becomes the obvious number 1 answer here. So far it's tapping in, well, just change. Developing the toolkits. Yeah. Always fun to see what an audience comes up with in real time.
It is.
Okay. I see some people putting other phones. Yesterday there was was it Kahoot? Was a tool that was used to get feedback?
Yeah. That's a good tool.
Yeah, that was a good tool, except I ran out of time voting for the first answer. So this is not time-based until I hit the next slide. It looks like we've got a little bit of a
lead.
Well, yeah.
Lead building up.
And a good horse race, though,
there we go. Okay. But this will also help us restructure the roadmap priorities.
Right. And that was really great feedback, Jigal, in the back, as far as some of the items that feel like they're late in the roadmap could be pushed up. But you might have noticed for that 3-year roadmap, almost everything starts within the first 6 to 12 months. But yeah, this can certainly help us, like you just said, reprioritize. All right. And then the final, and just to make things confusing and crazy, another QR code. But this one, if you hit it, it'll take you just to a real simple form. Fill in your name, your company, your email address, and an open space for you to indicate how you could participate, contribute, support, encourage, be an ambassador of this effort within your organization, within your communities. So take a moment here, please. And if you have interest in supporting this effort, if you have your voice that you think can help amplify this cause, give us your name, we'll follow up with you. This will all just be kept within the small working
Actually,
group.
you want to ask them to raise their hand so I can share it to buildingSMART leadership?
Exactly. Yeah, so assuming that at least 8 of you are in the process of filling this in, please raise your hands if it is something that you think that you'll
raise your hands.
Want to be contacted.
I want to take it to leadership. See, there's enough support in this.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great.
And we'll just keep that up for a minute or so. And thank you, Jag, again.
I appreciate it, Mark. Well, thanks. Very well done. Outstanding. Thanks for the survey. Very important effort. We'll continue this effort online. We have 2 more speakers, sets of speakers. So the first, basically, one, we are now going to talk about user stories, really. The first one is Jantien Stotter from TU Delft. And she worked with Francesca Noarda, and they're working on a very, very large and important use case that has elements tied into this to this roadmap. So Jantien, if you're ready, I'd like you to go forward. Francesca and Jantien worked on this, and Scott supported the presentation. So that's the first story, and then I won't come back again. The second story is by Michel, Rives, Michael Buffers, and Greg Schleusner on another very large use case on geotechnics and BIM integration. So I think they have 15 to 20-minute stories. So these are very, very cool things that are happening in the industry. So Jantien, if you're ready, go for it, please.
Okay, welcome everybody. So thank you for providing me the opportunity to present the Check project. As already was mentioned, I coordinate this project together with Francesca from OTC, and myself, I'm from Delft University of Technology from the Netherlands. And I think this project is a very nice use case for the integration between Geo and BIM. And the need for the integration between BIM and Geo comes from the aim of the project, which is to evaluate the impact of the design, which is captured in the BIM on its environment, which is captured in the geodata, from the early design stage to the construction. So through the whole workflow and every step of that workflow. And the ultimate aim is to apply automatic compliance checking from building codes. So that only needs the BIM model, but more interestingly for the BIM and geo integration is the automated checking of urbanistic rules. For example, the maximum height of the building, of the new design in relation to the height of the roads, or the amount of solar irradiation that falls on the facade of the building. And this aim comes from the need to accelerate the building permit process. So these processes can be very lengthy. And this is a huge problem because of the housing issues that we are facing in different countries. But also we would like to realize an improvement of the transparency of the building permit process, which also influences the efficiency, because nowadays practices is that architects, they design new buildings, and only when the building permit is submitted, the officer at the end will assess how that design fits with the rules. And if you have all those data, the data of the physical environment, but also geodata that captures the planning rules, if you have that available through the whole process, you can improve the transparency of the checking. And for this, we need the integration between BIM and geodata. And more importantly, we need this beyond individual organizations and domains and projects, and also not working only in one software. And that is why for us, it's very important to have open standards that support this integration. And in our project, we use CityGML and CityJSON for the standard defining the geographical context, and IFC to capture the data during the design and construction process. So this is a huge project, at least for us. We'll receive 5 million euros from European Commission, and we have 19 European partners. And as you can see here, they cover the whole value chain from designers and the constructors to municipalities who do the checking, We have both OGC and buildingSMART in the consortium, software vendors, and also research institutes. And here you see an overview of the project, what we will work on in the 3 years. So it started 1st of October last year, so already 1 year on our way. And the important first step is to define the requirements for the BIM data and the GIS data based on the checks that need to be performed. And we express these requirements in standards, in IFC and CityJSON. We call that check CityJSON and check CityGML and check IFC. And there's software, BIM software and GIS software to derive the data according to those requirements in the standards that we will define. We will develop analysis software to do the automated checking. We also will develop conversions between Geo and BIM that support this process. And all this should lead to an OpenAI-based modular platform for digital building permit processing, where all the steps can be carried out by stakeholders. Also, education and training is very important, and also guiding the change processes at municipalities, because it's also a change in the workflows of municipalities to support this process. So I was asked also to see how this project, how it maps to the different steps in the roadmaps that was just presented, and this project will contribute to the different steps in the roadmap, because also the two major standardization organizations are part of the project. So you see here a few of the roadmap elements, the roadmap steps. I will not go into detail here, but I think it shows how this project is a very nice use case to operationalize difficult English word to the roadmap. Just going into a bit more detail for one or two of the deliverables of the project, also in relation to the roadmap, is the establishment of the information requirements and also the development of open data modeling standards that support our use case. So here on the right side, you see IFC, how we will use it in our project. So the check IFC will be a subset of IFC, and we will define the check IFC in information delivery specification. And we also will develop an IFC georeferencing tool. And on the other side, for CityJSON and CityGML, also again, the check CityGML is a subset of a CityGML standard. Maybe it's good to mention that CityJSON is also an implementation of CityGML, but it's a JSON implementation instead of a GML implementation. It's a bit complicated if you have not been part of the standardization process, but I'm happy to tell you more about this later on. And then what's also interesting for us is the conversion between Geo and BIM and to Geo. So also one of the steps on the roadmap. So for making the Geo data available for designers, we developed 2 plugins for this moment. So one CityJSON importer for Autodesk Revit, and that is because we see a huge need by designers to implement the context, the geographical context in their software. This sounds like an easy step to do, but it's the development of this importer also took into account the mapping of the CityJSON to the Autodesk data structure, and the same we did for Rhino. So these importers are available as open source and can be used to import the CityJSON data as we will define it in check. And also we worked on the other way around conversion, so from BIM to Geo. And for this, we developed an open source IFC envelope extractor. And this is also based on years of research and experiences in development of BIM and geo integration solutions. So, of course, you can import the whole BIM model with all its details in a geographical context, and that is nice for visualization. But if you want to do an analysis on the data on the BIM model in its geographical context, you need the geographical concepts that are derived from the BIM, so like the envelope of the whole building and the rooms and the floors. So that is just the geo perspective on the building is very different than the BIM perspective on the building. And here, you see some of the outcomes of the automated envelope extractor. So the input is a BIM model, and it converts to the different levels of detail that we know in the 3D city modeling domain. So I know in the BIM domain you have levels of development, but in the 3D city modeling we call them levels of detail. They are formalized, and so we are working on IFC envelope extractor that derives this geo at different levels of detail from BIM. And as you see here, both the file sizes and also the number of phases are significantly reduced in this conversion. Another project that I work on, which is also a very nice use case, is the BIM legal project, in which we, at the Dutch Cadastre, we will accept in which deeds of divisions can be submitted via a BIM. So all the legal requirements that are valid in that building, in the building complex, in the apartment complex, are submitted to the Cadastre. And also here we define a standard specifications, how that BIM model should look like in IFC. So here we map the legal concepts to IFC concepts. And so that notaries can prepare the data accordingly. And also this project, we will define the requirements as information delivery standard, and we will use and extend the buildingSMART validation service for this at the Cadastre. So the conclusion, the question is also what changes are still needed to make these use cases real, and how can the roadmap help, and also the other way around, how can we contribute to the roadmap? So I have 3 items in green, because I think these are more or less straightforward. So to derive geo concepts from BIM, and the other way around, to make geodata accessible in BIM applications. And then the third one is the georeferencing. I think, the latest version of IFC, there's very nice ways to have a standardized way for georeferencing. But I think there are 2 items that really need further attention, and one of them is to develop standards, profiles, so not come up with new standards, but from the existing standards, see how they can further refine what we need. So we used to throw data over the fence, as we say it in the Netherlands, without caring how the data can be used downstream. But for the BIM and geo integration, we need to understand how the BIM data is being used downstream, and how this data need to be prepared, and the other way around, and this needs to be expressed in standards. Also, the transformation needs to be standardized. So I showed you one of our solutions, but there are many different ways to convert BIM to geo and the other way around. And also here we need standards and standard workflows to make sure that all the developments are contributing to each other. And the same is true for the georeferencing. Also here, there are different ways to express georeferencing information, but we need a standardized way to make the use cases real and not only work within the context of the project. And then finally, and maybe this one is the most complicated one, is the agreements framework for the geo and BIM data exchange across organizations and across domains and across softwares. And I name here a few. And I think one of the most complicated ones will be to synchronize the BIM and geodata workflows. So as you see in the picture here, on the workflows will not be linear. So it's not that you transfer BIM to geo and then back to BIM. So all the workflows, they have their own base. And it's nice that you convert the data from BIM to Geo to be able to do a GIS analysis, but how to make sure that all these data sets remain consistent. So we know that we cannot work on one big data model, one single source of truth. But this needs a new concept of sharing data between organizations and domains. So with that, I come to the end of my presentation. I have a lot more to tell, but I think in the context of this of today, I think this is enough.
To solve some really important siting problems for buildings and the permitting process and digitalization. So maybe in the interest of time, you only have 20 minutes, Michel, sorry, but I think I'll say reserve the questions and I will provide Jantien's email and Francesca's email, and they're both actively working on this. So after the meeting, if you can contact me. I don't want to keep anybody here after 5:30. So Michel, please. Thank you, Jantien, again.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the time allocating to this session. I'll be just sort of show-proofing you what we've been doing for the past 2.5 years, trying to get things practical when it comes to getting the GIS community and the civil engineering community. Just for the record, I do run a company that does consulting for BIM management, BIM deployment in the field of major infrastructure projects, roadway, railways, tunnels. And in that context, of course, we have a series of experts, various disciplines, and the more recent things that I've been doing was on behalf of buildingSMART International, run a project for extending the IFCs to serve the tunneling industry. And one of the first things that we identified we needed to do was to get basically the interaction between geotechnicians and civil engineers better or leaner, and the interaction between the civil engineers and the systems engineers leaner or better. So there was a sort of a triangle of interconnections that we knew upfront we needed to address, because the everyday situation on projects is that those communications are extremely difficult. Reminds me as well, I've been part of the OGC Europe management board at a point in time, years back, but I do recall that some of the difficulties that people were having understanding each other's constraints and worries was, for example, at the time, GIS experts would consider BIM experts as quote idiots. They deal with files, whereas we GIS experts, we deal with databases. So we are by far more intelligent than these people dealing with files. Now the thing is, in civil engineering projects these days, today, most of the project's information is actually stored in databases. And even more important, the way BIM solutions refer to deals with georeferencing, for example, is exactly the same way as GIS does. So that was one of the initial initiatives between OGC and BSI that has led to the way that georeferencing is managed exactly the same way. So there are no idiots on both sides. Now, I think we are to a level where we can ensure that everything that we manage in a project is referenced properly. That was sort of the first thing. So back to the IFC for tunneling project. As a use case, and though we started 2.5 years ago, so this roadmap was not in place, but I think what we do fits pretty well into this. It injects somehow some insights. Let me first maybe start by sort of summarizing in the context of a real-world project. What are the exchanges that may happen between those who deal with GIS and those who deal with BIM data, whatever the format, agnostic of the implementation mechanics? First thing is on a infrastructure project, the first thing you do, you define what's the functional requirement of this project. So that's what's the capacity of this infrastructure that you need to be designing. And in order to do this, you of course set up a program. And the program first thing has to deal with what is the population that we need to serve. So, we need to access social demographic databases, which is not a BIM database typically. You need to be as well accessing the cadastre database, for example, because of course you plan on land acquisition. You need to sort of try to make the best assessment of what the subsoil situation might be if you go with a, whatever project, but if you go typically with a tunneling project, you try to have, the best possible definition of what it is that you may encounter, which you do not know of before you've started excavating. So you try to gather that information from different sources within your civil engineering design package. And from there, you then start the design by itself, so to, of course, minimize the impact and better serve as much as you can the population that is supposed to be using the infrastructure in question. So you start consuming data from other sources, and you do the design. So you try to match the as planned, as designed, and then you track the construction itself. And then there are deviations, sometimes for very good reasons. You try to minimize the footprint of the infrastructure itself when it comes, for example, to cut and fill. So you try to limit the impact on the properties that you will need to purchase. Of course, when it comes to this underground infrastructure projects, you need to be dealing with what kind of excavation methods am I going to be using, and what kind of structural support am I going to be creating given the underground situations. So you'll be consuming what the geotechnicians are producing, and from that you optimize your project, both from the alignment perspective as well as from the structural aspect of things. Once that is done, and you may take some measures to improve the subsoil, once that is done, what you won't want to do is to document what you have been encountering as you've excavated the tunnel, because as I said earlier on, you start from a foreseeable situation that you don't know of, and then you discover it as you move forward. But once you have discovered it, what matters is that you document it, and that it be then stored into a database that may be used by the next project, like the next tunnel that may connect to it, or a building that may be developed nearby that tunnel, which will benefit then from the fact that you, whilst excavating, have encountered that and that and that and that kind of subsoil, with its quality or lack thereof. So once as built, then the information has to go back to a database, which typically should be a GIS, a geology, or geotechnical database. So this is the mix between long-lasting data, GIS typically, geology typically, geotechnical typically, and short-lasting data like the design data or the construction data. And that's okay, and that's actually a very good thing, not to duplicate, but to connect. If I were to jump on two concepts that you've stressed, integrated requirements and connection as opposed to duplication, and of course the risks associated to it. So all this makes full sense if you look at, and this is of course today still somewhat in place, somewhat the technology allows for it. And I haven't spoken about the digital twin, which is a bit of a more real-time kind of a thing, but it's something that is indeed populated by what is the outcome of the construction itself from an asset management perspective and from an operational, structure operation perspective. So within the tunneling project, we've identified those three disciplines: geotechnics, excavation and support, and the systems that allow for the operation of the tunnel. Now, what I'm focusing on is now more the first part, the geotechnics part, which of course stresses the necessity of optimizing the connection between those different databases and the project database. To serve this, the first action we took was to define a set of common concepts, because we knew that whatever the mechanics, again, we knew that we needed to make sure that the concepts were understood both sides, right? Geotechnical as well as civil engineering. And from that, we did develop a set of common domain concepts and properties, which in a sense will fill into those actions here in the roadmap. So just to make the roadmap, as a matter of fact, practical already today. In that exercise, first thing we did was to look at what OGC had as far as geotechnical data is concerned, and what BSI has had with 4.3 as far as geology data is concerned. And we could find out that there were a series of concepts that were clearly missing. So both sides needed to improve, and both sides needed to make sure we have concepts that are understood a common way. That's the critical thing. Things needs to be understood the common way. So that was the basis upon which we started our project, and we set aside the problematic of the mechanics itself, the implementation itself, right? Because we concentrated on domain concepts. In addition to these and those two groups, we considered as well other quote formats like AGS or DIGS, which are typically related to borehole data, observation data, laboratory test data used in the US or used in the UK, with the idea that these describes these things very, very diligently, and we could, of course, imagine the principle of linking data stored in that format as opposed to upload that data into an IFC exchange file. And just to give you a sense of what all this is describing, it describes what we call factual data. So again, borehole data typically, in situ test results and so on. And on one side, on the other side, it describes everything that relates to the interpretation that the geotechnician is making of that data to build up a model that is a bit of a probabilistic model, because again, we don't know what the subsoil exactly is about, but we make a sort of a projection. It's not an interpolation, it's an interpretation. So the geotechnician injects into that exercise is knowledge in order to say, well, the probability of the consistency of the configuration of the subsoil in those areas will be of that nature, with uncertainties. And of course, the uncertainties list to the possibility of risks when it comes to excavating and when it comes to building up the structural support for an underground structure. The last part deals with how this data is to be used by the civil engineer, because the civil engineer needs the result of what the geotechnician has produced, period. He doesn't need to be doing the interpretation himself. He shouldn't be doing. That's really two different disciplines. But then this is the model upon which he will decide upon the excavation method and the support method. This is typically the kind of results that the exchange, the geotechnician will define what they call coherent sectional configurations, upon which the civil engineer will define the structural design that he needs to propose to realize the tunnel. And that was something that we all agreed upon. So both on the geotechnical side of things and the civil engineering side of things, we agreed upon structuring data that way. That was the first steps. And from there, we could organize the details of which concepts were making up each of those three ABC so-called books. Just to give you a sense as well of what matters in that context, while it's progressing, captures are made of what it is that has been encountered exactly, with a additional annotation that geologists would put in, so that those sections here can still be part of a 3D model, though they are just a 2D snapshot. But it helps understand, because that kind of snapshot doesn't happen every half a meter. It does happen like every 5-10 meters, depending upon the excavation method that is used. So that is important for everyone to understand what is the exact situation that has been encountered along the chainage of the the tunnel. And a way to exchange information and to improve the exchange of information and the understanding both parts between a geotechnician and a civil engineer is to provide the civil engineer with an easy way to understand what's this probabilistic model that the geotechnician has been created. And that's typically in the form of a voxel. A voxel is a set of little bricks next to each other, little cells that contain information as to, for example, the subsoil of that nature that was encountered, or the probability of next to this, find that one subsoil again, or maybe not next to it, right? So it typically carries out a probability of what the subsoil actually might be. And on that basis, the civil engineer will optimize his alignment. As I mentioned earlier, geoscience or geotechnics was one part of the project, excavation was another part, systems was another part. Now I'm more jumping into the implementation on the BSI side of things, just to prove that we've carried out and moved into the practicalities in terms of implementation on the IFC side. Doing so, we worked out with more than 20 solution providers, because of course everyone has its own tool, and the different tools have their own conceptual model internally for design, and they want to make sure that they map with this set of concepts that we've created in common. So we had a series of discussions to make sure that that was in line with what they had. Some software vendors had to improve their conceptual model because the IFC OGC model was richer than what they had internally, that kind of considerations. That is leading to the IFC 4.4 version of IFC, which we are finalizing as we speak. But I would like to take now the occasion to provide Michel Beaufils, who is leading a similar initiative on the OGC side, so in terms of implementation, who is a leader of this Geotech IE initiative, to comment the few slides that follow, so that you have a sense of what is being done as we speak on the OGC side. So just to make sure that everyone understands here that this is practical thing that we develop, and again, hoping that this is going to be serving the roadmap. This is only one use case. Do you have Michael online? Michael, are you here?
Yes, I'm here, Michel. Do you hear me?
Okay, then over to you.
Okay, I wish I'm asking because it seems you don't have the latest version of the slide. So, okay, cool. So this one was missing. Just an introduction of this Geotech IE. So first, my name is Michel Beaufils. I'm working for the French Geological Survey, and I'm also the OGC Geoscience Domain Working Group Chair. So I'm very pushing this topic of GIS and BIM connection, and together with Michel, we applied it to tunnel and especially geotechnics. That is a very nice use case for this connection. So you have here just an overview of what is Geotech IE about. This is something that started on the February 2022 and supposed to end in end 2023. So our research for digital continuity, because that's the main topic between GIS and BIM. We of course address the topic of geometry, but it's not the only thing to take care of. Semantic alignment, that's a big one to address, common wordings to explain things, APIs to access data, and documentation. We have to explain people how it may work. So our method for geotechnics, we had collaborative construction, because what we designed was imagined and discussed with several community of standards. So OGC and BSI, you know them now, but there are also other community of standards for geotechnics. One is AGS in the UK, and the other is DIGS in the US, and they have already solution for that. I won't go into much detail on that. These are the list of the objects we will find in both OGC and the BSI implementation of geotechnical data. And you can see also the perimeter of AGS and DIG. It's more about the geotech investigation. So what you do on the field, do on samples you collect. And well, this is a common definition of concepts we decide to work on. And also you can see the cover of both OGC and BSI, and you can see that for the tunnel topic, geotech, the geotech part for tunneling, the cover is pretty nice between OGC and BSI. We have something we would like to promote as OGC and think that it could be very helpful for BSI. It's the capacity to have access to data from the web, going further than the files and this idea of APIs. So you can collect only small pieces, only what you need. And when you think about digital twin, it may be a nice way, you know, if you have data that are updated often. So we want to promote that thing because OGC API offers such tools, functionalities. And this idea is that when you access the data through API, you might probably have different formats of I would call them file or data structures that will enable you to play with it. And that's something we especially promote for geotechnics. So having some, well, solution to get the data and have it in different flavor. So we call it, yes, a la carte approach, or the idea is, well, depending on the use case, you may prefer different formats and based on the software you use. So you should be able to access them at the same place, but you may have the possibility to define in which flavor, in which taste you want to get the data. So is it based on XML, GeoSci-ML data model, based on buildingSMART national flavor, or AGS or DIGS? It should be up to you to do that, but for making that happen, you have to have the same semantics. We go further than only speaking how to do that. We try to demonstrate that. And for this thing, we work closely with OGC standard working group in order to have them extending their standards, especially one API that is used for providing observation measurements. So we propose an extension for handling borehole data. So it's about position along a line that is dig in the soil. So very similar to tunnel finally, but it's more vertical than the horizontal. And we propose this extension, build it with people from the standard working group in order to expose geotechnical data. So some for people that are aware of geotechnics, CPT, SPT, and pressure method test data. Then, so that's just a quick overview of what we do. If you want to follow us, we have a wiki page on which you can see what is the project about, and especially links to this implementation that we made. We also wrote a white paper together with Michel and other people about this idea to connect better the GIS and BIM domain, especially for geotechnics. So this is also available on the website I precised before. And another thing I would like to highlight is, well, we are speaking about GIS and BIM between BSI and between OGC. There is another kind of consortium to consider. It's where geotechnical engineers speak about how things should be done. And this is ISSMGE. So we have a new working group called TC222, in which we address the connection and the way those geotechnical data should be exposed with BIM and digital twin. So that could be a nice thing to connect in order to close the triangle between OGC, BNSI, have this ISSMG on board, would be nice for geotechnics. Thanks, and I give back the hands to Michel for the conclusion.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Michel, give us 5 minutes. I think Greg is going to come up, and this is another excellent, very large use case. Geotechnical issues underpin all development for linear infrastructure and also for buildings. And this is exactly the type of activity that the roadmap will promote and continue to develop similar user stories. But Greg is going to give us a little bit of spiel on how the world is changing, so data modeling and data continuity. So go ahead, Greg. He needs 5 minutes to wrap this up. So
yeah, last of the last is not the best place to be. So we'll keep this very short. So I think that the key things that we're thinking about in buildingSMART, and then in the context of this discussion, is what we heard through the roadmaps was, okay, there's two worlds. There's the BIM and GIS world, right? They're separated. And then the evolution of this idea was sort of this semantic alignment. So something that looks like this, they overlap on the key concepts that happen there. But what you'll find is a lot of useful data intentionally doesn't overlap because there's different representations for a reason. And so the evolution of these really concepts is really coming out from the work we have to do within buildingSMART itself when the infrastructure community comes up, which is to say, actually these are all similar concepts that describe similar data. So we're saying something to the effect that actually this GIS representation and a BIM representation, let's have you actually describe the same thing. But traditionally, this would mean, oh, we'll convert to some super format, or we go back and forth. And in most cases, while the data is in flight or in use, you want to keep them separate but related. So this is describing the same, the pile or other pieces of information or the same subsurface geometry. Certainly there will be cases when you want to do a conversion, but we should keep track of that so we can reverse engineer it. So the idea that I'm actually going to do a conversion and I can convert the other way, it's a lossy process when we do these conversions. So this is actually something, if we need to do it, we should make relationships between this data so we can actually do stuff like, oh, it's out of date. It needs to be updated. These sort of things are very difficult. And this is basically the sort of what I'm describing as a microcosm of the work we're doing in buildingSMART now, pointing to IFC5, which is taking our standard and putting it in a system that looks like this. And on the OGC side, the conversations we'll be having is how can we adapt the standards that exist, not to make new ones, but make them work within a system like this so we can sit side by side and then do these semantic conversions when necessary. So that's it. That's all for me.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Greg. So that pretty much concludes our session. I hope you saw the roadmap, the actions that are planned. You see the existing work, how it aligns with the roadmap. There's a lot of synergies. You can see when Greg presented this, the concept of modularity and how to connect data and retain it in its own source of truth with versioning and event control and event management. So GIS and BIM can become transactional data stores, the systems. And that's ultimately the goal. And truly, thank you all the speakers for presenting, and thanks all of you for sticking around. So see you all at the dinner if you're going there. So have a good evening.
Thank you all.